And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
In the palms join. Put the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for showing up and being here. Very often people, especially if you're newer to this practice, have this idea that it's complicated, or if you've been at this a while, 6 months, a year, there's this sense of like, okay, is this stuff going to work? When am I going to get better? When am I going to be healed? When am I going to be fixed? Things like that. This practice is a daily practice every day of your life. And that's it. And for me, it's always about just reminding ourselves. And I very often feel like I sit up here and I'm just talking to myself and you're all here. So I guess thanks for being here. But it's a reminder that every day you're challenged. Every day you face difficulties. Every day you'll face conflict. Every day the world will react and respond in ways that you don't want them to. That's what we get. Like it or not. And the sooner you embrace that and accept that, you can just enjoy your life. And everything that people say is going on in the world today, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years from now, every day there was stuff going on in the world that was just not okay with you. And that will always be there. Are there times that are seemingly more challenging and more difficult than other times? Sure. But most importantly, this practice isn't about fixing any of that. It's not about ignoring any of that and closing your eyes to any of that. It's becoming very aware of everything that's out there and engaging in the world to make the world a better place. But this practice very specifically starts with you. And for people who have a very difficult time going inward, then this practice is definitely for you. Right? It's very easy to point fingers and blame everything else and everyone else for everything that's going on in the world. And I'm not saying that people don't have a role or an impact in what's going on. But this practice specifically says, where am I at? Where's my kindness? Where's my compassion? Where's my understanding? Where's my forgiveness? All those key words you read in every Pema Children book. It is about putting that into your life. And that's it. And that's why, to me, I don't complicate this stuff. It's simple. Be aware of what you think, be aware of what you say, be aware of what you do. And that just goes on repeat every single day. And we show up. We keep showing up to all the madness in the world. We keep showing up to all the madness in our communities, and we do what we can to make a difference. But it starts with recognizing, where am I at? Where's my head? Where's my heart? What are my actions? What's my intention? What's my motivation? Where's it coming from? And if we're coming from places filled with greed and anger and ignorance, then we're just bringing more greed and anger and ignorance into a world that, as we all know, is filled with greed and anger and ignorance. So this practice is to actually be a little change, a little bit of light into a world that is filled with greed and anger and ignorance. Because I believe, and to me this is what Buddhist teachings has taught me, that if you bring generosity, compassion, and wisdom into the world, then there's very clearly more generosity, compassion, and wisdom in the world. And that's a good thing. So stick with that. So we'll start with a meditation practice. To those who are joining virtually, welcome, glad you're here. Feel free to say hello. There's a chat box on the screen somewhere. For those who are maybe sitting or joining for the first time, a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice of learning to get quiet is still within all of the chaos. Posture, you want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps sliding to the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten, shoulders to relax. If you're on a bench or chair, same thing. Just trying to sit up straight. If you're one who tends to cross your legs or slouch or kick back, try to actually break that habit and sit upright. So you are actually at an attention position so you can be aware of what's going on with you. Most important, do not expect anything from this practice. We're just going to sit and breathe. I'll guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. And I'll say things periodically to either wake you up because you've fallen asleep or remind you that you're lost in thought and bring you back to present moment. Starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice. You're just sitting, breathing. body still, rested. And the speech quiet, aware of all sounds. And the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. When ready, slowly open the eyes. Slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada. It means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. And so all you're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful. Whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It's direct perception into the present moment. And as we know, the present moment is very often filled with conflict, chaos, difficulty, challenges. This practice is learning to be with life as it arises, not running from it, but facing it. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, becoming aware of everything you think, everything you say, and everything you do in each moment. That's the practice. What you think, what you say, and what you do creates the world around you. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone else outside of us, and we start with changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. This practice for me is like taking all of that stuff that you feel you carry on your shoulders, all your burden, all your pressures, everything, and setting them down. To allow yourself to find gratitude and appreciation for everything that's in your life. And when you begin to take care of yourself, you can then pick everything up again. And yet there's no weight to it. But that's a practice. Most people just get shattered by everything they're carrying and they don't know how to set it down. So they typically just disregard it or throw it away. As opposed to knowing how to carry it without being crushed. If you can do this, you can make tremendous change in your life and in the life of those around you. But it starts with taking care of you, which is very often, for some reason, the last thing that people make time for. So many people in this room are so wonderful taking care of everything and everyone else. But when it comes time to taking care of that person in the mirror, you're too busy all of a sudden. Don't be too busy. The clock is ticking, time's running out. Stop. Set things down. Most of the things that we concern ourselves with and worry about will be just fine. And that doesn't mean don't stop fighting to make the world a kinder, gentler, safer place. It means fight to make the world a kinder, gentler, safer place without destroying yourself in the process. So with that, I'll pause. For me, I always really prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. For those who are joining virtually, again, welcome, glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. Feel free to say hello. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box. I'll do my best to respond. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this morning for questions.
Yeah, there's in the Judeo-Christian Bible, there's a lot of curses and there's blessings. In fact, Jesus got sort of kicked off with a fig tree. What about Buddhism? Is there any curses or blessings? Like the Pope, he kisses his ring and he gives you a blessing. Does the Dalai Lama, he kisses his ring and he gives you a blessing?
Yeah, so the question around, the Judeo-Christian religions, there's a lot of, what did you say, curses?
Yeah, like the curse on the fig tree, curse on people,
Like curse in a bad way, right? Like,
of course.
like okay. I wasn't sure if I heard that right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then same thing. You referenced, like the Pope. I think you said you kissed the ring, right? Not just the Godfather.
Well, that's the way they're going.
Yeah. You referenced the Dalai Lama. So is there anything in Buddhism like that? When I hear that question, what comes up to me, and I'll start with this very generally maybe, is just around ritual, right? Around religious ritual and practices. And in Buddhism, there's a lot like that. There's a lot of stuff like that. I think very different from the way that you're asking it or that we may typically perceive it. One example is, say, Tibetan law, and each Buddhist tradition, each culture is going to have different rituals, right? But let's say Tibetan lamas, for example. So when a Tibetan lama would show up, or when you would, welcome or embrace a lama, you would have what's called a kata. This is, again, very traditional Tibetan ritual or practice. And it's almost like a scarf. I mean, it really is a scarf, right? Real thin, white, and you've probably seen them here when we've had Tibetan lamas. But so you would take the kata, K-A-T-A, I think it's spelled, and you would offer it to the lama. You can Google this. You'll see the Dalai Lama, lots of Tibetan lamas doing it. And they would, in essence, kind of come down, and your hands would be joined together, and their hands would be joined together, and your heads are almost like kind of touching your foreheads. And there would be a blessing or a prayer or whatever the Lama is doing. I'm not a Tibetan Lama, so honestly, I got no idea what they're doing. But they would be doing some sort of blessing and almost like holding the kata with you. So like your hands hold it, their hands hold it. They give it a blessing, and then they'll put it back over you. With the beautiful blessing of something along the lines of loving kindness and compassion and, curses, not so much. Right? At least not that I've come across. I've yet to read the Buddhist cursing sutra. I'm a big Harry Potter fan, so maybe there's some spells out there I just haven't learned yet. But I also want to point out that historically, I'm sure, right, as you know, Buddhism, which has gone for 2,500 years into different cultures, would go into cultures where maybe there were blessings and curses and things already going on in that culture. And then Buddhism comes into it and meshes with it. So then maybe some Buddhists are doing some things. But specifically as far as Buddhist teachings, there's even one sutra where I talk about this in a completely different context, but often people kind of saw the Buddha as like this miracle worker. And a woman had lost her child and went to the Buddha and asked him to bring the child back, as if he had these, powers to do that. And he asked her to go collect a mustard seed from every home that had not known loss or death. And so, obviously, she didn't collect one. And it was a lesson on the impermanent nature of all phenomena, and that this is a part of our life's existence. So in that example, it wasn't him using some powers to bring the child back. It was a lesson of what do we learn from this painful, heartbreaking experience that it happens to everyone. So appreciate every moment and everything. I think that's pretty magical if we can do that. So there are also another one that pops into my mind, say the Japanese Zen tradition. You won't see this so much anymore in modern day, especially in America. But if you've ever seen images of, say, in a traditional Japanese Zendo meditation hall, where the Zen master or whoever's leading the meditation, which usually would be a Zen priest or Zen monk, depending upon the tradition, they would be walking with a kind of like a walking stick, a staff, a meditation stick. Modern day, they call it a mindfulness, stick or something like that. But you would, in essence, in, again, very traditional Japanese culture, in the meditation hall, as you were doing Zazen, which is seated meditation, and if you started to nod off or something like that, they would come up and hit you with it. Hard enough to wake you up. Yeah. So, and it was in that regard, and you would even almost, again, I've seen it kind of in modern day translated, different places do it differently, but almost to where the master would walk up in front of you and you would join your palms and bow to it as they would then. But it's not meant to do harm or anything like that. It's really meant to bring you back to present moment. Because waking up to present moment is the beauty. Because that's what's real. So, yeah.
I was introduced a few years ago to an extravagantly large Buddhist congregation that seemed to feel that the more meditating they did, the more they would get what they wanted. It was like praying. They had a speaker who had from somewhere over in China or somewhere where he'd spent the last 8 years extensively meditating daily, and he finally achieved something in his personal life, business life, or something that he wanted. Others that I spoke to said, oh yes, since I joined, I got this happened to me, and this happened to me. But this here seems to be definitely not that.
Yeah, this is not that. As I often say, and you can quote me, even in Buddhism, there's a lot of weird shit out there. And I mean that very seriously, right? I mean, it's a religion and a philosophy and a way of life, whatever you want to call it. It's been around for 2,500 years. And humans will ruin anything. They really will. So there's a lot of different schools and traditions and lineages, and as I always say, I think it's very important to find places that you feel safe, comfortable, and where the people who lead are very genuine and authentically sharing their practice. Almost similar to the question last week. Here, since you mentioned it's not here, we're very, obviously we bring in guest monks and nuns and lamas and things like that, but I couldn't tell you how many people, there have been more people who've asked and wanted to lead and teach stuff here that I've said no to than those that I've said yes to. And as soon as somebody thinks they're like some teacher, they have something to like teach you, we have no interest in having them lead. So, yeah, very different. But again, even in Buddhism, that stuff is out there, but it's important to kind of discern, are these actually teachings of the Buddha, or are these things that people have just taken? I mean, there's a whole school of Tibetan, what they call Tibetan Buddhism, that thinks the Dalai Lama is the devil. And they're right here in San Diego, and you can roam right in there, and you'll see Buddhist tankas like that, and you'll see Buddhist statues like that, and you'll see the stories of their master, and they'll tell you, you cannot read the Dalai Lama, you cannot read Thich Nhat Hanh, you cannot read Pema Chodron, they're all bad. You must read our person. So that's everywhere. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. So I think my mind is generating a lot of thoughts that I don't really believe, but like they're annoying and like they're so out of line with what I. For example, this morning I went to a yoga class and a Zumba class. You know, and I'm there to get healthy, be happy. So is everyone there. And my mind is being so mean to people. I'm like, listen, you're fucking happy. Or like, wow, you wore that tube top. And like, I'm like, what is up? Or like, I don't know, like, oh wow, like you think that's a good pose? And I'm like, what am I doing? I don't believe that. But then the more I try to like say, don't think that, my mind's like, oh really, bitch? I'll show you what I'll think. And so then I'm thinking that's like meditation kind of, where it's like, right, I'm not supposed to like stop the thought. I'm supposed to just like not attached to it. But I don't want to be sitting in yoga just being like mean.
Yeah. Man, we don't do info. What was the last thing you said? Help? Can you help? We don't do infomercials, but if I did, that would be the front page of our website. I'm telling you. Can I help? I can't help you. But I can show you, hopefully, how to help yourself. First and foremost, I hope, even in the way that you asked this, and if you're not doing this, I mean this very seriously, I hope that you're able to see you in the process of doing that lightly and joyfully and with humor. Because even though you kind of asked it with humor and everybody laughed because it sounds funny, inside of you, and what's your name? Sorry. Austin. Inside of you, you might actually be thinking you're a terrible person for doing that. So first and foremost, I want to point out that even though you bring light to it, I hope you really do find humor in it. I mean, I laugh at what an idiot I am all day long at the thoughts I have. And not in a judging way as I would have done, say, 20 years ago, but in a way of like, God, I can't believe I still think that, or I can't believe that went through my head. So first and foremost, it's important to recognize that's going to go on. You've been doing it your whole life. You're going to probably do it a lot longer. A couple little Buddhist meditation classes aren't going to free you from that. What that means is, so that's the first part. The second part is to understand that, which I think you kind of said in your question or in your sharing, that, as the Buddha would say, come from a place of loving kindness and compassion, not from anger, hatred, critique, judgment, things like that. So recognize that what you're doing, which again is why you're asking this, really isn't the best thing to do, but without hating yourself for doing it, right? And recognize that you want to change that and stop that, which is why you're here and why you're asking the question. Also recognize that that process, as I already mentioned, is going to take some time. But Buddhist teachings around right speech is really important to observe. And I'll get back to your thing in a minute. But looking at, do we gossip? Do we slander, right? Don't gossip, don't slander. Is what we're saying, is it honest? Is it necessary? Is it timely? Is it true? So in your beautiful description of what you did this morning at yoga, you pretty much failed at all of those. But when I say failed at all of them, that doesn't mean you're going to hell because you violated all these precepts. It means just to recognize that you are using such a judgmental, critiquing mind, and we want to come out of that place. It's also not true because you don't know anything about the person, right? And this is really important to spin around when we reflect on us. We're often, wow, Austin, if you're this, I don't know the right word, towards everyone else, how are you towards yourself? That's where it begins. Can you begin to look at yourself and not have those thoughts towards yourself? That's where the practice starts. And to recognize that, I read something recently, I saw one of those, stupid little social media memes, which was really great. It said something about we don't talk to anybody more than we talk to ourselves in our own head. And how kind are we to ourselves? So if you can practice loving kindness and compassion, talking to yourself about yourself, then maybe you can bring that out into the world. Another thing to do is stop looking around. If the practice is to stop this, right? And actually, I'm not a yogi, I've done it, but so I'm not going to give yoga advice here, but the practice is, you're not doing yoga for the person in the funny whatever, right? You're doing it for you. So your practice, very much, this is why there's one kind of tradition lineage with Zen practice, that Zazen, seated meditation, where you just sit, you're facing a wall. And you're like this far from the wall, and you're guarding your senses. You're not looking around at anybody else. You're not worried about what they're wearing, what they're eating, what they look like, how their downward dog is working out for them. You're just on you. And that's what life is as a practice. So next time you go, stop looking around. Look at your mat. And see what that does. And also just, you don't seem like you need to feel too better about this, but I want to point out something years ago. Sharon Salzberg, many of you might know her, read her, wonderful Buddhist teacher, incredible books. But she gave a talk years ago. I heard her say something to the effect of, imagine, you're in a meditation hall and there's 60 people there or whatever. And if you walk in and everybody looks all calm and quiet and peaceful, and they got this whatever look going on. Imagine if there was this machine that almost like headphones you put on, and then you turned it on, and everybody took a turn wearing it, and all it did was actually broadcast your thoughts. The thoughts would be very different from what you were perceiving. What this means is there's a good chance that every single person in that room is doing the exact same thing you're doing. That doesn't make it right, it doesn't make it okay, but you're not the only one who's sitting there judging everybody else's, yoga attire. So, yeah. What else? Yeah.
What did the Buddha think about like war and fighting back? You know, like when to defend yourself or that.
Yeah. Anytime someone asks a question about, and I always start with this when they say, what did the Buddha think about? Or what is, I don't know.
Okay. Oh, that's fine.
I don't know. You'd have to ask him, and he died 2,500 years ago, so I can't tell you what he thought. What I can tell you is the questions around war and fighting back. It is understanding your karma, your actions. We all choose to do whatever we want. You want to engage in war, engage in war. You want to fight back, fight back. Understand the law of cause and effect, which is karma. Karma literally means action, what we think, what we say, and what we do. Understand that the causal relationship of all phenomena, what we do, the law of cause and effect, our karma, has an impact. And I'm pretty sure that the Buddha would not be a big fan of war. But I'm also pretty sure the Buddha would be a fan of making sure that you're healthy and safe. And that looks differently to different people at different times in different ways. So I always look at the Buddhist teachings not directly as right and wrong and good and bad, but to begin to honestly understand what is the intention. I spent 12 years working with active military folks coming back from combat, Navy SEALs, snipers, trained to kill. And I worked with them every week on developing a meditation practice. And very closely with the Navy psychiatrist who a couple weeks in, one of the guys, after we were doing meditation, he said they were working to get cleared by their medical boards to go back to combat. And there's a lot of Buddhists I know, and this isn't like to make me sound great and then sound terrible, but there's a lot of Buddhist teachers out there who actually won't work with active military or veteran, or I should say active military, because they're so hung up on their views about war. I just see humans. And somebody said to me, you should have taught the meditation practice. He was a sniper, and he said, you should have taught us this before we deployed. He said, I would have been better at my job. And I walked out of there and I realized I probably possibly, this is a big assumption, made him a better killer. And I was talking to the Navy psychiatrist I worked with for years who built this program. It was the Navy's first residential treatment program for active military with PTSD and TBI. And he says, well, how does that make you feel? And I thought about it. I still remember it was a Point Loma Naval Base walking out, and I said, not my place to judge who he is or what he does. It's my place to recognize that he's human, he's suffering, he has a wife and 2 kids who he'd like to be able to function with. And it's my place to help him find a sense of peace and joy in his life. Another thing I'll tell you, years ago, we call her Smitty, Mary Beth, veteran. She was a Navy pilot. She's a priest at the Japanese Buddhist temple downtown, very dear friends of ours for a long time. And when I first started working in that population, I talked with her for a while. And she said to me, Jeff, most people who join the military don't sign up because they want to go start a war and kill people. They sign up because they want peace. And they're willing to sacrifice themselves and do anything they can to create peace. And it really began to shape and shift my views. The Buddha also says, cause no harm. So, a lot to unpack there.
Right.
Yeah. Hand over here and then we'll go here. Yeah.
So, you kind of answered some of this already, but I'm thinking about it a lot, about when you realize that it's time to set things down, and you're a person who is 24/7 helping other people, and you always have. How do you balance kind of service to others and kindness to some that really listening, that it's the time to set things down?
Yeah, the time is now.
Yeah.
I mean, the way you ask that question, the look on the face, and the just absolute destruction you're about to break into right now, how do you know when the time is? The time is now. That's when the time is. Like, not tomorrow, not next week. The time is now to start taking care of you. For one to say 24/7 helping others, one to be very, again, this isn't, but it's not 24/7, obviously. You sleep, you eat, you know, that's for you. The time to take care of yourself is always now. Been on an airplane, oxygen mask falls, what do they tell you to do? Yourself first. So this whole idea, which is common in Buddhist sanghas, communities, is, you know, very often people show up to places like this because they have a good heart. If they weren't aware of that, they probably wouldn't come to places like this. Or if they weren't seeking to really allow that beautiful heart to shine, they probably wouldn't end up in places like this. So what that means is people like that care a lot about others. But very often those caregivers, caretakers, in whatever way that means, again, the Buddha talked a lot about this non-self idea, but if you don't take care of yourself, you don't get to know yourself, you can't get rid of this self. So there's nothing wrong with taking care of you. It's actually harmful to not take care of you. Because if you don't take care of you, how can you be there for anybody else? You know, so the time is now. And if you're out of balance, you'll know it. Right? Yeah.
Two questions. About the figures behind you.
Yeah.
What's with the small one, the emaciated dark one?
Yeah.
And also, is the androgyny that I'm seeing in the three figures, is that purposeful or just stylistic over the years? It just
Yeah. So questions around the statues, specifically, let's start with the emaciated Buddha, right? One of my favorite stories, which I haven't told in a while. So, you know the Buddha was a human, right? I mean, I don't know what your level of understanding is. Everyone in here know the Buddha was not. It's a big belly dude floating in the sky, right? He was just a dude. So he was a prince, all the wealth, all the riches, everything in the world, completely spoiled, had it all, right? At 29 years old, he left the palace. His father kept him very sheltered. It said when he was born, he would either become a great king or like an ascetic, you know, a simple, you know, kind of a kind, wise person. So father knew he had a good heart, didn't want him to go out into the world and see any pain or suffering, so they sheltered him. 29 years old, I'll you know, for time's sake, he snuck out and saw four things: old age, sickness, and death, and an ascetic, like a nun or a monk. And he went back to his buddy and he said, how can I live with a life of wealth and riches when there's a world out there that's suffering? So he left home, snuck out in the middle of the night, roamed the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years. And during this time, he met up with 5 other yogis. They were ascetics, right? They were living that kind of yoga life, probably not making fun of other people's tank tops, but either way, they were yogis hanging out together. And they thought at the time that starving themselves would be the way to overcome suffering. That if they overcame attachment to physical form. So they, as it said, ate 1 grain of rice a day. And they say they did lots of things. You know, they would hang from a tree for weeks at a time, stand on one leg for, you know, days at a time, whatever, to try to overcome their attachment to physical form. And 1 grain of rice a day, they say that he was so skinny, he put his finger in the front, finger in the back, and you could touch, right? Came to a riverbed, and a woman offered him some food, some porridge. And all his buddies were like, no, we don't eat. You know, we're done with that. And he said something to the effect of, I'm hungry. So he took the bowl and he said, I'll put it in the stream. And if it goes against the stream, then I'm going to eat. Put the bowl in the stream, goes against the stream, he starts to eat. His buddies are like, you traitor, you food eater, you sellout, you know. They left him. He began to eat, he regained his strength, continued around, and at 35 he sat down under the Bodhi tree and said, I'm not moving until I figure out why we suffer. So he began to understand the nature of all suffering is the mind. Greed, anger, ignorance. He taught that tapestry above the exit sign up there. Those are those same 5 guys who left him. they saw him sitting under the Bodhi tree, and they said, there's Siddhartha Gautama, let's go sit with him. It looks like he's figured something out. They sat down, he taught the Four Noble Truths, fundamental Buddhist teaching, suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering in the path, Eightfold Path, on Google for free. And they said, we'll call you the Buddha, the awakened one, right? So he then taught for 45 years, he died at 80. Now, when we opened the Dharma Bum Temple, end of 2006, going into 2007, literally at New Year's, the very first Buddha that we picked to open the temple, which we got from Buddha for You 17 years ago, ironically. Now we are Buddha for You, but this was in its earlier incarnation. We picked that statue. Why? That was us. Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually near death. Right? We were not these enlightened beings. We were not these Buddhas. We were not anything. We were that guy. And so we decided to, instead of have a Buddhist place where you're sitting with this enlightened Buddha, we wanted to sit with a dude who was doing it wrong. Or was doing it unhealthy, I should say. And it became kind of a mirror, a reflection of like, if this guy, who was physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally near death, could figure it out, that was motivating to us. So instead of trying to become these enlightened Buddhas, let's figure out where we're starving to death. And that's a metaphor for everything, right? Not just like the burger. So that's that statue. Make sense?
Yes.
And then the other statues, when we moved here 7 years ago to this location, we were downtown for 10 years. We moved here 7 years ago. About 6 years ago, a couple came to us, to Maggie and I, said, how would you like to complete the shrine? And the three large ones are very traditional Taiwanese style. We had them made there by a family that had been making temple statues for many generations. Long process, beautiful. Somewhere it's on our website, on the blog. But we picked Kuan Yin as our center one. Well, I'll start here. We picked Manjushri, represents ultimate wisdom. Samantabhadra represents great practice. The 6 tusks of the Paramitas, generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom. And then we picked Kuan Yin in the middle, which is, her name means hearer of the world's cries. So she hears all the suffering in the world, pours out compassion. And we felt that kind of often, so Kuan Yin ultimately transcends gender, but in Buddhism very often, especially over the last, say, 1,000 years, it's really, Kuan Yin is often represented in the female form. And to us, we really felt that this temple, this community, this city, this country, this world needed more feminine energy. And so we wanted a temple shrine that had Kuan Yin at the center. And I love it because there she is holding, or in this one pouring out, but often the base of compassion is held or poured out. And I love it because the Kuan Yin is pouring out compassion directly onto the dude who was doing it wrong. Take that for what it means, as far as like the way they look with the makeup and things like that, you'll see that in different cultures very differently. Every culture portrays them differently. Manjushri was a dude. Samantabhadra was a dude. Kuan Yin, female. Yeah. But different cultures portray them differently. Yeah. So, does that help?
Yes.
Yeah. There's one question here I'm going to close with. I know you're not a parent, but if you were a parent, how would you deal with a 13-year-old doing I quote, how would you deal with a 13-year-old doing 13-year-old shit, like, say, throwing water balloons at cars where cops intervene? I don't necessarily see the benefit of taking things away. I'd rather build up. I'd also like to make room for kids doing kid stuff, but don't want to condone kids endlessly doing kid shit. What would you do? So, I can't, as you said, relate to being the parent with a 13-year-old kid, but I can relate to being the 13-year-old kid doing that exact same thing. Balloons, eggs, bricks, you name it. And I'm not saying that jokingly, it's very serious. And clearly these practices, these ways of being are not, they're not good for anyone to do at any age. And I think that any action that causes harm, and these actions are coming from a place of anger and ignorance and hatred, and cause harm, to others and to themselves and to the family. It's important for me to look at Buddhist teachings around loving kindness, compassion, understanding, forgiveness, and to listen. It's very easy to say, I'm just going to take, I'm going to lock the 13-year-old in the room, or I'm going to take away the water balloons, or whatever it might be. But we all know that doesn't do it. Begin to understand. Listen. Why is the child doing this? And in all likelihood, very often, the parent's not going to get the answer to that. So have the child talk to others. Begin to understand, why is the child doing this? Because what starts out as water balloons at 13 will become something else. And it's not about, to me, punishment or not punishment. Again, I'm not giving parents advice, and this is not the space for that. But begin to understand why. Also understand that we as adults hopefully are not throwing water balloons at police cars anymore, but in many ways we're doing the same things with other things. And if we can begin to understand, why are we doing these things? What do we need to express? Who do we need to listen to us? Who do we need to forgive? Where's our anger coming from? If we can do that ourselves, then it'll help us understand why a child would do things like that. So I would start there. Why? Why are they doing it? Give them an opportunity to share why they're doing it. Most 13-year-old kids doing that stuff, they know it's wrong, they just don't care. So ask them why. Yeah. So I'm going to close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most, including the 13-year-old kid. All right, a few announcements before you all head out. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm the Dharma Bum. We opened up this temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Every night we have different practices going on, different people leading from a different Buddhist tradition. Thursday, 4:30, it is back, the food redistribution program. For me, I still think it's one of the best things around here. We prepare gourmet vegetarian meals, also known as peanut butter and jelly, and we feed people who sleep on the street. So anytime you think your life sucks and you lack gratitude for what's going on, feed people who sleep on a sidewalk, and it tends to put things into perspective. If it doesn't work, come back and keep doing it until you start to recognize it. A couple things just out of the ordinary or different. The downstairs space, which is why the food redistribution program was on hold. The renovations on the downstairs meditation hall are done. We built that space when we moved in about 6-7 years ago for most of our recovery meetings, but it's too small, so we spent about 3 weeks renovating that space. We, in essence, doubled the space, which is beautiful, but the flooring just got dropped off a few days ago. It'll sit for 2 weeks to acclimate. Then we will sand it and finish it, or then we'll lay it, then we'll wait 2 weeks to sand it and finish it. So we're still realistically about a month away from using that space, but everything with food redistribution and everything else is still happening. We're just using the dining hall for that area. So Buddha for You is back open. Everything's down there if you need anything. And then if you haven't heard, San Diego Pride, the Dharma Bum Temple every year, San Diego Pride, for what's called the Stonewall Awards. We received the Light of Pride Award, which is really just an incredible honor to kind of highlight and showcase the work that we do, as I've been saying, not just as an ally to the LGBTQ community, but really as what we consider a spiritual home to the Pride community. And we have been since day one, but we'll be receiving that award at Light at the Cathedral on July 17th. The 20th, we will be marching as a temple in the Pride Parade. So you can go to the website, click on Pride Parade, you can sign up. There's also a flyer out on the wall there with a QR code to sign up. I put on the application, going back to Wright's speech, I put on the application that we would have 50 to 100 people walking with us, because you had to give them an idea of how many. So I don't want to be a liar. But the Buddha also said you shouldn't use pressure and guilt to get what you want. So now I'm kind of stuck, you know. But please join us. We've got a bunch of people going. It's going to be a beautiful day. We're going to march in the parade. And then it's at 10 a.m. We will have meditation that day for those who don't go. And then Monday, the 22nd, that's the biggest challenge for them, is then cleaning up Balboa Park the day after the festival. So also on the website where you click on Pride Parade, you can click that you want to volunteer to help Monday morning, probably about 7 a.m. the 22nd, to help clean up Balboa Park. We had probably 30 people last year from here help out. It's a time where we really need a lot of help, and everybody's worn out and exhausted from the festival and the beautiful week. So if you want to sign up for that, we'd love your help. So otherwise, thanks for being here. Wish you well.